We're back from Vegas. Let's talk about the top 5 things I think that are takeaways from the trip. Alright everyone, hey, welcome back to Kitchen Table TCG. My name's Louie. I'm here today back from our trip to Vegas, the Calling 2021, an amazing experience. It was so cool, so much fun to meet you guys, a lot of people, and hang out and talk and play Flesh and Blood, and to see the community at a larger scale. It was a super fun time. The community, just an amazing group of people. I want to talk about the 5 things I think I learned about Flesh and Blood from the Calling, and I got to hang out with people and talk to people for, I bet you I slept 5 hours a night. So for 19 hours I was around people talking about Flesh and Blood, hearing your stories, hearing why you were at the Calling, hearing your stories of how you got into Flesh and Blood. I want to talk about my top 5 things that I think were applicable to this community based on that. Number 1, people do not get sick of playing Flesh and Blood. It was absolutely ridiculous. I love Flesh and Blood. I love playing Flesh and Blood, but like you guys just don't stop playing. Literally, we were at the Calling, we were at the venue, and everyone's playing. Like there's games going on literally everywhere for the whole day. And then like people went out to dinner or whatever, and then you came back, like we went out to dinner, we went to like a comedy club, we went, played the slots, and you came back in the hotel and we were at the Spring Hill Suites, and in the lobby, people were still playing Flesh and Blood. And like you had people who were practicing, but then you also just had people, like there were people playing Ultimate Pit Fight. There were people just hanging out and playing the game. People don't get sick of it. It's crazy. You guys were there and people don't get sick of playing Flesh and Blood. I was playing, I was doing the same thing. Me and Robbie on the flight home played with our Tales of Aria draft decks on the flight. It was amazing. So number 1 is that people don't get sick of playing this game. Number 2, I kept hearing this phrase talking about the Magic the Gathering Grand Prix. And what I learned is that for a lot of people, this kind of replaced going to a Magic the Gathering Grand Prix. And now I have never been to a Magic the Gathering Grand Prix, so I have no like recollection of it. I have nothing to compare it to. That was not my life. I played Magic the Gathering very casually. I never even, I guess I one time thought about going to like a Commander Fest. But a lot of conversations happened around, hey, and I would hear this a lot, back when I was at a Grand Prix, or back when Channel Fireball did Magic the Gathering Grand Prix, or back in Grand Prix Vegas, 2008, this happened. And I was baffled by the amount of people who had played Magic the Gathering Grand Prix prior and were now in the Flesh and Blood world. So like I knew that people like me came from the Magic the Gathering world into playing Flesh and Blood, and I knew that there was a competitive scene from the Magic the Gathering world into Flesh and Blood. But I think what I underestimated is how many competitive Magic the Gathering players there were, and I'm learning how big that community is. And what I really underestimated is how many people from our community used to participate in Magic the Gathering Grand Prix, which they don't offer anymore. I think now they were called Magic Fests or something like that. I think they even canceled those or aren't doing those anymore. But it was amazing. It was crazy to see how many people had been to prior Magic the Gathering events and how they were comparing things to now. And I thought that was really interesting, really, it's probably really good for Flesh and Blood, honestly. It's probably really good to have that experience and that history of going and playing competitive Magic the Gathering. So pretty cool. Number 3, players are way more focused on meta breakdowns than they were about trading cold foils. I saw very few cards that were being sold or traded while I was hanging out in the main event lobby hall. Like, there was not a ton of trading going on. Now, I am aware of at least one sale of a Heart of Fandel, a cold foil heart that somebody came up and told me that they purchased. And so there were things going around. There were things being bought and traded. Somebody was walking around selling some cold foils. There was a little bit about that, but most of the conversation that I was aware of anyway, most of the conversation in the room was actually talking about the metagame and the breakdown, and people were, asking, hey, are the Katsu players playing controller or aggro? And people were having a lot of conversations based around the gameplay, not as much about trading. And honestly, I thought we would see a little bit more of the collector trader environment. I don't know if it had something to do with the amount of money that the vendors had to pay, or I don't have any clue about any of that. But what I do know is that most of the conversations were focused on gameplay and not trading. Very interesting. I mean, I expected that, but I expected more trading and purchasing than was happening. I expected it to be heavily focused on the gameplay, but I thought there would be more of the trading going on, which suggests to me that a lot of people didn't even bring things in order to trade. Maybe they had already traded or sold their stuff leading up to the trip. Number 4, and these are in no particular order, our community is the freaking best. Like, I literally wrote it down like that. Here's why. Number 1, I want to start off with this. The mask policy. I think I saw one person who had their mask down and was talking, and somebody came and asked them to put their mask back up, and they did it. And they complained a little bit afterwards because they were just like, yeah, anyway, it doesn't matter. Most of the time, I would say 99.9% of the time, everyone had masks on. Nobody was complaining about it. Nobody was making a big stink or deal about it. The entire community they were respectful. Whether they believed in it or not, they were respectful of the rules. In addition to that, people were just super fun to hang out with, super cool, super chill. I know, like, the professor was hanging out there, and people could just come up and talk to him and hang out. I talked to the cosplayers. Like, I did I was in a content creator draft. It was me and the 2 cosplayers and Chris from Flesh and Blood and Seals. And one of the cosplayers was like, this is the best community ever. I haven't felt awkward. I haven't felt like, she was just like, it's been a great time hanging out. And they were just complimenting on how great our community is and how respectful our community is. And that was amazing. And then the third part of that segment is the amount of, like, shaking hands after games. And, you lose, and it was just like, everyone just cared enough to be respectful and encouraging and excited about the game. And it made me really, really proud. It made me really proud to be a part of this community. Sometimes you're on Facebook and you see the whining and the complaining, and you start, like, wondering, like, am I still proud to be a part of this community? And this weekend, seeing people in real life and their interactions with each other and the way that they handled each other, the way that they handled themselves around each other, made me really, really proud to be part of this community. And then the last thing, I put down LSS. This is the last thing I learned, like the biggest takeaway. LSS is pulling off the impossible in the middle of a pandemic. I put this, imagine if we were not in the middle of a pandemic. And in the middle of all this going on, we had 13, I'm estimating, I don't know what the official numbers are, I'm estimating that there were 1,300 people there during the day for the main event. In the middle of this pandemic, in the middle of what's going on in the world, LSS is doing the impossible. They are creating an amazing organized play structure for you and for I to play the game, to experience this game with people in the flesh and blood. And Channel Fireball did a great job of running the event. There were some hiccups with some things and whatever, and I know there were judge calls that people were questioning, and there were some things going on with the side events and the way that there were some things going on. But at the end of the day, like 1,300 people, at the end of the weekend, 1,300 people were able to get together and play the game. And I think 99.9% of people probably had an amazing experience. And LSS is really pulling off something that's impossible. Not impossible, but it's hard to do, and they're doing a great job. And so here's this thing, like, as we move from Vegas, I couldn't help but think about all these people, all of us, who went to Vegas, took pictures, and played games, and had an incredible experience, took off work. And you're going to go back home, and someone's going to say, hey, where were you this weekend? And you're going to show them and they're gonna be like, oh, what's Flesh and Blood? And all the people, all the Facebook posts and the Twitter posts and the things, think about how much free advertisements, think about how much amazing advertisement is happening for the game of Flesh and Blood right now as a result of this event. LSS, you guys have done a great job. I cannot wait to see the next couple weeks as we move through. Like the hype is built so high, that the set is so good for Tales. You have this massive event that's just gonna propel the excitement for the set, the excitement for the next kind of season of Flesh and Blood, and it's gonna be super, super cool. So I just wanted to share my kind of 5 biggest takeaways. I think we're in for a really, really exciting next 6 months for Flesh and Blood, both as a player, as a collector, as an investor. The last thing, a little bonus number 6 for those of you who are still watching, a little bonus number 6 is it was great that Chain didn't win, in my opinion, because it proves that the deck could be beat. And I know there's a lot of people complaining about Chain right now, but part of a meta means that there's going to be a number 1 deck, and the caveat to that means that there's probably something that can beat that number 1 deck. And the Prism deck beat it. The Prism deck beat it. I think the Prism deck beat it like 7 or 8 times. And just remember, just because something is really, really good doesn't mean that it doesn't have a weakness. And, you know, things that have weaknesses are subject to being beat. So I was excited that we can get off this Chain hate thing, because, like, man, the game is incredibly balanced. If you don't understand how balanced it is, like, I get it that sometimes for the other decks it's frustrating to play against Chain, but Chain is also taking a risk because of the balance structure of the way that the meta works. So anyway, hope you guys have a great day. Remember to be kind to the people around you. It was an amazing experience this past weekend. Thanks to all the people who came up and said hi. It was a lot of fun to get to know you. It's going to be a crazy next couple months. Hope you have fun this week at your Tales of Aria pre-releases, and let me know what you get in the comment section. Hope you guys have a great day. Remember to be kind to the people around you.